Welcome to another episode of the Two Dates and a Dash podcast. I'm your host, Matt Cubbler, and in this episode, I interview the amazing Paul Vibes. Sit back and relax and enjoy this episode of the Two Dates and a Dash podcast. What is up, podcast land? Welcome to another episode of the Two Dates and a Dash podcast. I'm your host, Matt Cubbler. Before I introduce my man, Paul Vibes, not a cool name, Paul Vibes. Obviously, he wasn't given the last name Vibes. So we'll talk about that when we introduce him. But first, I want to let everybody know where they can find the podcast. Anywhere pretty much you have podcasts, you can find mine. iHeart, Pandora, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, you name it. My podcast can be found on pretty much every platform. If you're going and listening to the podcast and it gives you an option to rate and review, please do that. It helps as far as my ranking and all that kind of silly nonsense. Also, make sure you're subscribing and you put your podcast on automatic download. That just makes it easier for me as far as making sure that when you go on, the most recent episodes are on your platform. So thank you for that. To learn more about me, you want to know more about Matt Cubbler, you want to learn more about my book, A Brother's Love, a memoir, where I'm speaking, the more other podcast stuff. I have the other podcast, Third Ship Chronicles. You can go to my website, mattcubbler.com. So thank you, everybody. My man, Paul Vibes. So he's like the coolest, hippest guy, and he's just eager to learn. And so when we sort of became friends on social media, and then we got on a phone call, and next thing you know, he's got a podcast, and he's speaking and doing all kinds of great stuff in his community, and I'm really excited to have him on the show. So without further ado, my man, Paul, how are you?
I'm doing amazing. Thank you so much for having me.
It's awesome. He's a young guy. How old are you? 20?
26. But I'm telling you, I'm at that age now where I have to think for a moment. How old am I? Time goes by so fast.
Well, when you get to 49, then we can have that conversation.
I would love to have a conversation when I'm that age.
Yeah, let's hope so. So Paul is he has a learning disability that he grew up with and has overcome that learning disability, and he's going on to help other people, especially younger people who are dealing with learning disabilities and the stigma that comes around that, and helping people overcome and find out how to become their very best. And he's kind of like a bright light in an otherwise dark world for some of these people. So I'm very happy that you're here. I know you've seen the show. I know you understand the way I sort of don't have a plan to do the show. And I asked one question, and I don't know if you know the reason why. So as a cop, when I'm trying to figure out the whodunit, or if they're a victim, to try to get all the facts straight, sometimes you have to ask a broad question in order to understand how their brain works and understand how they piece together information, how they're able to articulate. And it gives you a really good understanding if you ask a broad question. So when I started a podcast, I'm like, how do I start my show? Like, what's my thing? Well, it's one question. And the easiest question I can ask someone is, who are they? Because what I do is research on you through your website and social media, and what I think you are based on what I read may be completely different than who you think you are. So I always like to get the guests answer this question. So I'm going to ask you the same question I ask everybody else. Who is Paul Vibes?
Who is Paul Vibes? And I just got to say, before I answer that for myself, I think that's an amazing question, because we live in a world where people make assumptions, right? They assume, and it's funny you're a cop, because I actually, one of my early passions in life, I wanted to be a police officer myself. And I think we live in a world where people make those snap judgments, and sometimes you're right, sometimes you're wrong, but that's a very limiting thing to do. So when I think back to my why, or who am I, it's changed a lot. I think we can agree. If you ask me this every year for the past couple of years of my life, it's changed. I've developed, I've grown. And one of the biggest key moments in my life, like you mentioned, was the learning disability. And it's something I still deal with today. But for me, my shift in growing up with my learning challenges was sitting there with a veteran. And I remember sitting there with a veteran. I know I told you the story before, but that moment when I was sitting there with a veteran in high school, I had this realization that no matter what challenges, whether it was a learning disability or struggles in school or bullying, that not just me, but we as individuals have the ability and power and capability to make a huge impact on people's lives. And I started looking at my challenges in a different way. I started taking care of myself more, started eating better, started exercising. All of a sudden the bullies stopped bullying me. They saw the strength in me and the confidence, and they became my friend. And I learned about the suffering and pain that caused them to be the bully. And I had the privilege and ability to stand up for other people who are going through, things in school, whether it was bullying, anxiety, and different challenges, and making impact on those students that were sitting alone in the cafeteria. And it kind of just catapulted me to this moment here when I'm speaking to you, and a lot of amazing things that I know I'm going to share with you in this podcast that I've been able to accomplish. And I truly don't believe that I don't think that I would be doing the things I'm doing now if it wasn't for overcoming my own learning disability. So it's been a journey. It's been a lot of fun though.
Well, I love it because I mean, we talked when we were on our phone call a while back about, I grew up with a brother who was autistic and had a severe stutter, and when you compare the two issues my brother dealt with, the autism, which is obviously a very clear limitation just on the cognitively and intellectually how his brain worked, but the one thing I think that really caused my brother the most stress and the most anguish was the stutter, because if my brother didn't speak, you'd look at him and be like, oh, he's just like everyone else. And the minute he opened his mouth, the severe stutter would start. And that would be the thing that drew the negative attention to him, that no one really would have had to figure out that he was autistic if he didn't stutter. Like there was a lot of things my brother was capable of doing that he might've been quirky and a little bit off, but it wouldn't have been anything outstanding like that stood out about him. But the stutter really just brought a lot of attention to him. So I know the stigma of living with something like that, having grown up with my brother and then being the brother of a kid who stutters. I mean, I don't know if you have siblings or not, but it's sometimes, and it's not a woe is me or boo-hoo me, but it was sometimes tough being the quote unquote normal brother in a relationship with the brother who had not only the autism and the learning disability, but also the severe stutter. I would gladly do it all over again 100 times if I could have my brother back for one more day, but I don't. And those are the things that, growing up as the younger brother who had to be the older brother, just by proxy, by default, I can truly appreciate the struggle that you went through and what you're doing to help kids that are also going through it themselves.
Yeah. And what's interesting, I appreciate you sharing that with us here, but what's amazing is, when I'm going up there might be people at these schools that are, when I'm giving my talks that can relate to having a learning disability or some type of disability. But with the way that I give my talk, I really am just connecting with people who have overcome diversity or dealt with diversity and overcoming challenge. And the truth is everyone's hands going up when I say who here has dealt with or dealing with challenges currently. So it's not even a matter of whether you have a disability or not. The fact is, if we're a human being and we're living on this planet, life is going to throw us challenges. And it's always great when somebody can connect with my story. And I've had a lot of times where I've given talks at SEPTA meetings and different like PTAs for people with special needs and, special needs organizations. And it's always great to have young adults and parents come up to me and be like, well, I can relate to that. Or parents saying, I can relate to that story with my son or daughter. But the truth of the matter is we overcome a lot of different challenges in this life. And my philosophy is when I'm speaking, and I'm sure you've heard this before, you may have said it once or twice, but my philosophy, if I can make an impact on one person's life when I'm speaking, it makes it worth it. Even with my own podcast, if somebody, just one person, I get a message that, hey, that really resonated with me. That's what it's all about. I
agree. Yeah, it's a I'm not sure if we spoke about this when we talked last, but when I decided to become a speaker, it wasn't because I wanted to be a speaker. It was because I was sharing my brother's story. And then I realized, how cathartic that was for me to share my brother's story. And then also how afterwards I would get those people that would come up and share something personal about their life or thank me for sharing a particular part of the story because it resonated with them. And the more you do that, and I think the longer you do the podcasting and do the speaking, the more you're going to want to continue to do that because it's that drug, that high that no one's ever going to criticize you for. There's not one person on the planet that's going to say, stop being a caring, loving human being who has empathy and understands the issues in humanity and how if we just connect and share and put it out there that we can probably overcome. If you do that every day, 100 times a day, no one's going to call you a junkie.
And if they do, it's fine. I'll be that
Yep.
junkie, because you know what? If there's a drug to be addicted to, it's helping other people. And, you know, like that story, the first time, that first natural high I got from sitting there, and it was a veteran, and we weren't doing anything fancy. I was literally just sitting there with him. Must have been 9th or 10th grade. And I remember sitting there with him. We weren't even playing a board game. I was just listening. I just kind of what you're doing. You do a great job with the people you interview, and you listen to them. And even as a job, I'm sure as a police officer, you have to really listen to people and to get the information from them. And just by sitting there with the veteran, I was like, oh my God, this is so rewarding. Why isn't everybody doing this? Why isn't everybody you're telling me there's jobs where people get paid to help other people? Why isn't everybody doing something like that? And that, like I said, set off a domino effect of getting involved in different volunteer experiences, you know, becoming a president of a local high school club, and then creating an organization, which I'd love to share in this podcast as well, you know, called the Buddy Club. And I know we have a lot of simple, you know, connections with the special needs community with your brother, and, you know, me overcoming my own learning disability. But basically the Buddy Club is an organization that I started back in 2011. It went from being the Paul's Buddies to the Northport Buddy to the Long Island Buddy Club. And like we all go through these changes and grow, the organization did as well. And we basically planned, it was very simple. We planned social events for young adults with special needs to make friends. But more importantly, we wanted to provide a safe environment. You know, we wanted to go to businesses and places that we knew that they would be safe and comfortable, and just constantly working on and improving the connection with the community. Because the idea is we want these young adults not just to feel safe when they're in a contained, you know, we're hanging out, we're planning the events, but I want them to go out, you know, after the buddy event and know that there's safe places, there's friendly businesses that they can go to. And it's been a surreal experience, just from the board meetings to planning the events, and then to finally sitting back and seeing the young adults mingle and connect. You get like a natural high from it. And I don't know if you've experienced this too, but people who don't know what it's like to do the volunteer experience and not involved in that, they may be focused on the outcome. What are we making from this? What's the point? They don't get it. There are some people that don't get it. And usually those people haven't had the experience that we've experienced when you're doing for other people. So yes, there's a lot of encouragement. There's a lot of positivity, but it is always interesting. You get that one or two person that's always, what if this goes wrong? What are you getting out of it? How much are you getting paid? And I'm like, listen, it's not about that. And that's
unfortunately, the world isn't, as much as everyone's got a soul and a heart and a conscience on some level.
Hope so.
Yeah, you would hope. I mean, 98% of the world, I believe, does on some level. And maybe they've forgotten a lot about what it's like to be a little bit vulnerable and to put themselves out there and to be exposed emotionally in front of other people. But, you know, getting people to wrap their head around just simply being present and impacting someone's life is hard, because we live in a world, especially in the business world. If you're, you know, as a cop, it's a little bit different, because I've always had to wear a uniform, and I've worked under a government type entity, which has a whole different set of problems. But in the private world, you know, you have a lot of competition in whether in sales or just private industry. There's competition to get ahead, and everybody gets so preoccupied in their world and what they're doing to get themselves ahead. And obviously for reasons that are important, you got to be able to pay your bills and take care of your family and leave a legacy, hopefully, for your next generation. But if you're not spending any time at all looking outward and figuring out how is the world around me being impacted by my actions or inactions, it's something that as a cop I see a lot of. I don't, and as much as you said you wanted to be a cop, I would tell you you're probably in a way better slot right now at 26 than I was at 26 as a cop. The world is, it's not always pretty, and cops don't get called to the happy places. We get called to the unhappy places and people that have problems. So it's not always an outcome-based business being a cop.
Yeah.
We wish it could be, but it's not always that way. And I'll give you an example real quick today. And this is just a random cop story, but I work in a pretty suburban area outside of Philadelphia, and it's not a high crime area. It's a very safe town, college town. We have our problems. When I had this woman, I called her to go to a CVS, which is like a Walgreens kind of place.
We got those, yeah.
Um, for a woman who wanted to report being molested as a child. And why would you go to a CVS to use the store phone to call the police, which was an odd thing. So I show up, and it's a 21-year-old African-American female who, after about 30 seconds of speaking to her, I could tell that she was having a psychiatric emergency. And she was all over the place with all different kinds of stories about things that none of which at any point in time connected to a logical thought. But I knew very clearly that she was in crisis. And the hardest part is trying to get someone who's in crisis, who has in their head a predetermined desire or want for whatever's going on in their head, and they want me to be the person that fixes that question or need. And when you have to get them to understand that we need to get your head balanced. Like, I got to get you into a balanced state. And it took about an hour for me to convince her to go get psychiatric help, because in her mind, she wanted me to arrest the person that molested her allegedly when she was 19 years before this. But right now was the most important part of her life, was getting that person held accountable and getting her off of that tract into an understanding of there's 500 things you just mentioned that I can't fix any of those 500 until we deal with your emergency that you're having a crisis right now. And finally, she was able to understand where I was coming from, which doesn't always happen. Sometimes you have to take them there without them wanting to go. And those are those moments where, I felt good because she's in a safe place now, and someone who's a professional can help her. And she's got 5 different psychiatric issues: bipolar, manic depression, paranoid schizophrenia. She's got all these things happening. She's only 21 years old. And you just feel so horrible for this person because, in her mind, this is all real and it's all happening. And in my world, I'm just trying to connect dots and try to find a pathway for me to be of service to her. And it's not always that outcome. And sometimes she's thinking that I let her down. If she wasn't willing to go and have that conversation with a professional, she'd be thinking that I didn't do my job and that I let her down. Another person, a long line of people that have hurt her. And you have to have that soft tone and that soft approach, but also the hard skin, knowing that at the end of this, it may not be the way that in your mind you would hope it would all work out. But luckily this time it did. But that's the world. We got to get more in tune with listening to people. And like you said, being able to listen. And I had to listen to all of her ramblings so I could find out whether there was one piece of it that I could latch onto and create an opportunity for her to feel like somebody was hearing her.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's interesting because as you're talking about that and the importance of listening, and I know before we went live, we were talking about The Power of Now, a book that I'm really a big fan of. And something that I'm constantly working as someone who wants to be a social worker is the importance of active listening. And I'll be honest, us in New York, we're constantly on the go. Or on the, when people ask you how their day is going, it's almost like they don't even really want you to respond. If you respond, they're looking at you like, what are you doing? And for me, I struggle with that because I'm constantly like, I really genuinely want to connect with people. I really want to connect with people. And one of the things in social work that reminded me of what you just talked about is when you're talking to someone, you may not be able to directly relate to them, right? And they may ask you, do you know what it's like to have a mental illness? Do you know what it's like to be a drug user? Do you know what it's like to be abused? And, oftentimes we may not be able to relate, or we may not even want to disclose different things about yourself. And to me, I've learned it's very important to say things like, listen, I don't understand, but I'm here to listen. And when you're on the scene with this lady or any scenes, there's going to be a lot of times where you're just not going to disclose this information, or you just can't relate to what they're going to, because of their color, their culture, or what they've gone through. But it's just so empowering for that individual, for us to say things like, listen, I don't understand, but I want to listen. Please share if you feel comfortable. Tell me what's going on.
Most people in the world today want someone to listen, want someone to hear them. And there's a difference between listening and hearing too. And, I can hear all kinds of things and doesn't mean I'm listening. Listening takes effort. Listening takes a want to understand. And that's where, not just the law enforcement, but in life in general, and people need to take a step back, look at the things that are important to them in this moment, be aware of what's going on around them. I talk to my kids all the time. I have a 22-year-old and a 17-year-old about situational awareness and being aware of your surrounding and knowing where you are at all times, and understanding the time and place. Like, is this the time and place to be doing this? And that's just an awareness exercise, and getting them to understand where they are at any given time. You're not going to yell out a cuss word in the middle of church. Like, you got to know where you're at. Like, you got to understand your environment and who's around you, and who would be someone that you could impact. And I just don't think we have, there's not enough parenting. And I don't know your situation growing up, but for me, parenting is an active process. It's not simply being there, quote unquote. It's an active process of molding a baby into a functioning, contributing member of society when they turn 18 to 22 years old. And that's literally been my job for the last 22 years, is being a role model and a teacher and a person that holds my kids accountable. And I think, based on your own, the time that we spent together and understanding your personality, somewhere along the line, whether you had both mom and dad at home and they were great parents, or parents are divorced or whatever, someone took you in to their heart and showed you how to become a person who has a giving heart. And that's not something that you just happen to happenstance fall into.
No
Someone
way.
helped create that.
Yeah, and I'm very thankful for the people I had. I mean, I have my mom and my dad, and I grew up with two aunts, and I always joke with people that I grew up with three moms, because I do have a very amazing child, and I still have amazing people in my life. And thankfully, even though I had a learning disability growing up, and I still deal with it to this day, I was able to get tested young. I was able to get the tutoring, and just to talk about my learning disability, it originated because I was choked by an umbilical cord at birth, and I had very minor brain damage, thank God. And at first, the doctors told my parents that I wasn't going to make this, wasn't going to make it. And I remember hearing this when I was the right, age, because I started asking my parents, why am I in smaller classes than everybody else? Why do I need tutoring every day? Why do I need summer school? Not everybody else is doing that. Some kids are, but why do I have to do it? And I remember them sharing this story with me. And of course, it's emotional. Even though they did it the right way, they did it with compassion, they did it gently, it's still rough to hear, because then you start thinking, and we've all been there, and people watching this, I'm sure, could agree. We've all had moments in our lives where we say, I wish this didn't happen. Why did this have to happen to me? And you start playing the pity game, and that does really deeply affect your confidence. But I had the support, I had the tutoring. And of course, what young adult wants to go to summer school, right? What young adult wants to go to tutoring? What young adult wants to go spend their lunch periods reviewing things that everyone else learned? But for some reason, I had to spend that extra time. But the one thing that it really taught me, and I get emotional thinking about this because it seems like almost like a different person, is I had to learn at a very young age that it's okay to ask for help. And kind of like how I'm sure your kids, you want them to be able to go to you, you want it to be a safe environment, you want them to also go to their coaches and their mentors or help. And this is one of the things I advocate and I talk about in my talks. But I had to learn at a young age that I don't know everything. It's okay to not know everything. And I had the ability and power to advocate and to reach out for help. So I was that student where if I was struggling, I wasn't afraid to go to the counseling office and talk about what's going on. I wasn't afraid to go to my parents most of the time. Not everyone wants to go run to their parents, right, when they're going and stuff. And I'm sure you face that too sometimes. And for me, it taught me at a young age that you have to work as a team. It takes a village, like the saying. And that skill, learning that at a young age, allowed me to eventually become president of a club in high school. It led me to get the skills and knowledge and insight to create my own organization. And now it gives me the ability to sit here, talk to you. And also, as I speak, these last few months, I've only started this recently. I've had the privilege of booking a lot of different talks. And I'm so grateful and appreciative of all the opportunity that comes my way. Because like you said, like the people that you can make an impact on in these talks, even if it's just working one-on-one, and like you were saying, even if you're going on the scene, you're talking to one person, that's one more person that we could make a positive impact on. And I look back and I say, if it wasn't for my learning disability, who knows where I'd be, I don't think that we would be sitting here.
And I think that's the powerful message, is that, you know, and I'm sure you went through periods where you talked about, you know, why did this happen to me? Well, it was me. It sounds like you got through them rather, and you're 26, so you don't have a whole lot of years of life under your belt yet. But for me, I was depressed for 13 years after my brother died. I mean, 13 years is a lot. It's half your life. I lived in a state of depression. And when you think about how long the period 13 years is, when you're talking to a 26-year-old, like, holy crap.
Long time.
But I don't look at those 13 years today. I certainly wasn't enjoying them when it was going on, but those 13 years today are probably the most meaningful years of my life, because I learned so many things about myself coming through that, that have elevated me in my, just on how I live each day, and what my expectations of myself and the people that are around me and my family and my environment where I go to work and when I speak. Those expectations are so much greater and so much clearer on what I want to accomplish in life and what I hope for other people to get in their life, that those 13 years were vital to this part happening. So, you know, your learning disability, while a struggle, and, you know, all those extra hours you had to spend doing the things that other kids may have found a waste of time, or didn't need as much time as you to figure things out. Those extra hours taught you a lesson that forever will now become part of your Paul Vibes footprint, right?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And even, you know, it's funny because, you know, my brother didn't have a learning disability. I do have a sibling 1 year younger than me. And I remember he got put in summer school, I think mainly because my parents didn't want me to feel alone. You know, it was just funny because, you know, to this day we joke about it, that he definitely didn't need to go to summer school, but they threw me in there with him, so I didn't feel alone. But yeah, I think that this is saying that the cracks are what the light, it allows the light to shine through. And I forgot what spiritual teacher talks about that. But for me, I look at my life, and it sounds like from what you just shared there, and you've talked to me in the past about, is that it's through that suffering that we learn and grow, and not necessarily be enlightened, but we learn and we grow and become the best version of ourselves. You know, I look back at my life, the times where things have been the hardest, even besides the learning disability, the most insights and the lessons and the experiences from that has been so much bigger than the things that you learn when everything's great and jolly and rainbows and unicorns. You know, sometimes it's like working out. You know, you got to rip the muscle to build the muscle. And life, there's ups and there's downs, and you almost have to learn to ride the waves, you know, and constantly grow and learn.
Well, I think it's you know, my wife, I tell her, I said, the reason why you have this guy as your husband, because of all the crappy girlfriends I had before. Like, I learned how to be the best version of me for you through all those other experiences. And, you know, my daughter had a breakup recently, so, you know, she's going through that. And I'm like, listen, there's going to be 5 more of this guy that come along the way that are going to teach you how to be your best version of you. And then also, who do I want? Who's that person that, you know, I've experienced this kind of person and that kind of person. Who's the one that's going to be my forever person?
Exactly.
And you have to go through those.
And same thing with you. I mean, even though you've worked on yourself, you, through the experiences you've been through, get to say, I like this quality, this person, I like a woman that does this. And what's funny is in the second part of my talk, I only have 3 parts of my talk. The first one is overcoming challenges, and I share my learning disability and tools and mindsets young adults can have to overcome their own challenges. The second part relates to what we're talking about, is the importance of seeking help and resources. And in that talk, I say, listen, your mentors, your parents, your guardians, your coaches, those people have coaches and mentors and people they look up to. And I think that you would agree that a lot of young adults in today's society, they got the internet on there like a god at their fingertips. And we unfortunately, we feel, and I'm part of that generation, we feel that we want to be able to solve everything ourselves. And one thing I try to inspire and push young adults to do is, listen, it's okay to ask for help. If you or somebody you know is going through something, whether it's a breakup, whether it's anxiety, whether it's depression, whether it's bullying, whatever it is, if you can't go to your parents or not even your counselor, talk to your friends' parents, talk to a coach, go to one of those hotlines, but to to have that ability. And like I said, I learned at a young age to reach out and to advocate for myself. And I really want to, inspire young adults to do the same for whatever challenge. It might not even be something they're going through. They might have a friend that they're not sure how to help, and they're afraid of how do I help them? And I want them to feel empowered to be like, listen, I want to reach out to somebody because I want what's best for myself, and I want what's best, for my loved ones.
I think one of the things that I learned, and then when I do a lot of mentoring for young kids, and learning what your strengths and weaknesses are, and learning what they are as you grow. Like, you're gonna have your core principal strengths and weaknesses that are just inherently inside of you. But then as you learn and experience more things, your strengths and your experiences grow, and hopefully your weaknesses are diminished on some level, that you work on the ones that can be worked on, the ones that you just suck at, you have to accept that you just suck. Now, I'm never going to jump high or run fast. There's not a whole lot I can do about that. That's DNA. So I'm not doing sprint drills trying to figure out how I can get my 40 time better. But growing up, learning what I was good at and what I wasn't good at, I didn't learn that until later. I was a smokescreen kid. I was smoking mirrors. I could con anybody into anything. I was the marijuana salesman who had a 4.0 and had a full ride to the Coast Guard Academy. Like, I was on both ends of the spectrum. People didn't know to look left or look right because I was always keeping them guessing. And it wasn't until I got older that I realized where I really was deficient and where my actual strengths were. I mean, I had some amazing strengths. One of which was the ability to lead and be someone that isn't afraid to have the responsibility and the accountability placed on their shoulders, and can solve complex problems and help get other people to the end game. But I also realized that I had a lot of weaknesses, which were, I had low self-esteem about success. I grew up in a divorced family with a autistic brother and on welfare. So we didn't have financial success. We didn't have a whole lot of the tangible successes. And I was low self-esteem on that. I didn't know how to become successful. I just knew how to be in that very moment. If I needed to get an A, I knew how to get an A, but I didn't know how to retain any of that information to keep that A in my head. I was like a dump and leave knowledge guy, right? I didn't retain anything. I was always in that very moment. How do I get whatever I need to get out of this moment? I didn't learn how to be educated in study habits and how to work hard for long periods of time. And I learned that later on in life. And had I not been that smoke and mirror kid, I don't know where I'd be today. If I actually had a work ethic, my mom was an English teacher. And I stole every one of her teacher's manuals when it was the same year that was in the year that she was teaching. And I got all the answers to all that. She didn't know any of that. Why? Because it was the easiest thing to do. Like, that was my success, was being resourceful and how do I get the most out of a moment without having to put in the most amount of work. And if I would have had a stronger work ethic, I might have I didn't go to the Coast Guard Academy because I knew I was going to get exposed. Like, I knew that I was a one-trick pony, and that if I was forced to learn and study and work hard, that I was going to get exposed. So I didn't go, and I went in the Army. And then little did I know, and this is just a side note, I went to Army intelligence and I became a decoder. So taking, like crypto quotes, a very simple level, I was decoding Russian code, but I literally failed out of that school because I didn't know how to learn. If I couldn't memorize, I didn't know anything. And I had to learn basically math. I was like, calculus and trigonometry with coding. Like, I went through all those classes in high school just enough to get by, but I didn't retain any of that information. So I had no idea how to study and learn. And the thing I was trying to avoid was getting, found out as a fraud, as a smoke and mirrors kid by going to the Coast Guard Academy. I ended up getting outed when I went to Intel school. So I didn't avoid that. I just redirected when it was going to happen. So those are all important things that kids need to learn. And I worked very hard on my kids to make sure that they're not smoke and mirror kids, that they have good work ethic and study habits and abilities to grow and learn and be self-sustained. but it starts first with knowing your strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah. And like, I could relate to a lot of that, because we tend to want to focus on our strengths. We tend to want to, because it's what's easy, and not easy, but it's what's comfortable. And for my own life, I'm very self-aware of my strengths and weaknesses. And it's funny you mentioned the whole leadership thing, because very naturally and organically tends to be in group projects, I'm usually the team leader. And it's not because I do the best of everything, or I have amazing strengths. It's because one of my strengths is going around and finding out what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, and let's focus on what we're good at. That doesn't mean that you don't improve upon the things that you struggle with. And that's something I'm always, like, I'm a great speaker. I love to speak in front of classrooms and schools. But if you ask me to maybe write down that same speech as an essay, right? There's going to be a lot of spelling errors and grammar, but I'm aware of that. So I know that I need to get things proofread. I know that I need extra time on that. I'm going to have multiple people look at my papers. And that's not smoke and mirrors. That's me acknowledging where I'm good and where I'm not. And I have the ability to seek that help. And I think you're right. A lot of young adults, struggle with that. We want to know everything. We want to do everything. We don't want to admit that we need support or we're struggling. We need to act strong. And I think especially a lot of men, we have trouble doing that. And even, I was mentioning before the importance of seeking, mentors and counseling. I think that that's another big thing, is people are afraid of talking about their mental health. They're afraid of admitting when they're being bullied, because they're afraid of looking like a loser or weak. They're afraid of talking about their mental health with their family because there's a stigma around it. They're afraid to talk about maybe the substances that they're using at a young age, whether it's cigarettes or marijuana, because they're afraid of being judged. They're afraid of what their parents are going to think. And, I really want young adults to be empowered, to seek help. It's a really important thing.
Mentorship's a huge component to life, I think. And mine was forced upon me because I got arrested. So I ended up with a cop as a mentor when I was in high school. And he was literally the guy to save my life. Like, if it wasn't for him, I don't know where I would have ended up. But he's, I didn't realize the value of where I could be in someone else's life as a mentor. Until I became a cop, and I was doing it more out of a service-related component because someone did it for me.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't necessarily because I had a plan on mentoring kids. It was just when I would see opportunities, and I would remind myself of me and a kid that maybe got himself in a little trouble. I would go a little extra mile trying to figure out how I could be a positive influence in their life. But kids today, and I'm lucky enough to where in my community I'm known as a mentor for kids, so I get a lot of parents reaching out to me asking me if I could work with their kids. So that's phenomenal. But the fact that there's more kids now than and this is probably in the last 8 to 10 years that it's been more consistent, but there's more kids now that are okay to tell their friends they got a mentor, right? I got somebody in my life that I can go to when that's not mom or dad, that mom and dad approve of and they're cool with, but it's somebody that I can go to and have a conversation with about maybe some shit that's a little bit realer than I'm willing or comfortable going with mom and dad.
No, I think that's important. I think that you do see that. You do see the world, my generation, that they're a lot more open.
Yes.
For talking about things. And then, Long Island here, I think around the world, there's a big, opioid epidemic, and things are getting better. And I think it truly comes down to the need and want to connect. And, even though I have, a lot of different themes and different talks that I give, it all has that underlying theme of connection. And, whether you're on the scene talking to somebody that needs help or going through a different conflict, or I'm going into the school, I want to spark that need and realization for young adults to really connect. They might be passing by the hall every day, or there might be someone in their cafeteria that is just in so desperate need of connection. I've given talks, and even to the buddy club, when I'm planning these different events, I've had parents come up to me, and I didn't realize the impact that the group. I knew it was a positive thing. We're creating friendships, we're creating bonds within the community. But I would hear stories of the parents coming up to me and saying, ever since my son or daughter, this particular mom was talking about a son, that since he's been coming to these events, he's doing better in school, he's more motivated. And the mom shared some deep stuff with me, and that, her son was depressed and suicidal and all these different things. And I would start hearing stories of this. And it was very emotional because I didn't know these parts of these people's lives, and I didn't realize how deep and how important just to want to connect is. And a lot of these events we would do were, like I said, very simple. I think the simplest things, the smallest things are what make the biggest impact. It would be events like going out to eat. I think a lot of us take that for granted. We call up a few friends and family, we go out to eat. And I think for some of us, it's extremely hard to feel comfortable. It's extremely hard to connect with other people. We're afraid of judgment. You're afraid of people, these people, young adults with different abilities and challenges, because they have a lot of abilities, but they'd be afraid of being judged and made fun of and looked at in different ways. So to hear these stories and the deep impact that it was making, it felt surreal. It felt almost like a movie. It didn't feel real because you would learn such intimate and inspiring stories of these young adults and these parents, that it just made a very deep impact on me and just reassured me that what I'm doing, I'm meant to do. And I look at it, I'm very privileged. I don't go, look at me, look at the impact. I believe that everybody, and I even say that my mission is not to have young adults create buddy clubs. If that's their mission, they want to be a cop, or they want to work with the special needs population. That's amazing. But I want them to kind of find their own change that they want to make, not just in their own lives, but like the change that they want to make for the community and the world. And that could be, as you know, there's a million different amazing things that we as humans can do. It doesn't need to be this or that. So to sit back and hear some of these stories, it's surreal. It really is.
So what is your, if you had a crystal ball and you could look into the future, what do you see for Paul Vibes, as far as, if you said, if I could paint whatever picture this is going to look like 10 years
Let
from
me get my paintbrush. Hold on.
What would it be? What's the goal? What's the, I know if I had to guess, you'd say, I just want to continue doing what I'm doing and impact as many people as I possibly can. But I get that. But where do you see, I mean, you got the podcast going, you've got your social media stuff you do, you got YouTube channel, you got the speaking, the buddy club. Like, what is the grand ta-da for Paul?
It's a good question. It's funny. I have been thinking about that because things are moving fast. Since the last time I spoke to you, I don't even know where to start. There's been so many improvements in learning, and as we know, not always easy learning experiences, but often those are the most important. For me, I would like to continue doing the planning events. I actually teamed up with another organization, so the Buddy Club. We shared our resources because we found that it's not a competition, especially when you're doing good for others. It's not about, look at the impact I'm making. It's, listen, if you and I right now can connect and make a bigger impact, put our egos aside and let's make it happen. So I want to continue to impact the special needs community. I want to continue to do the podcast. And I think I mentioned earlier, I'm actually going to school for social work. So my goal is to get my master's in social work and to have that degree under my belt. And what's really funny about that is it's aided me a lot as a speaker. I learned how to better connect with people. I learned how to better socialize, to better understand different people's cultures and background, and just better ways of communicating. One of my big goals, I think, after I graduate with that degree, is my two favorite things: traveling and speaking. I want to get one of those hippie vans in a way. I want to get a van and go state by state and go on tour. As you know, and I'm sure you've traveled for your talks as well, as I would love to, once I graduate, to do my two favorite things. I'd love to go see the world and get paid at the same time to do it. I mean, I would do it for free, but the amazing ability to get paid for something that you love is just inspiring and amazing. And that's something I think I really want to do. Right now, I'm just giving talks on Long Island right now as I go to school. And I also have a 3-year-old son. I don't know if I mentioned that to you earlier, but I'm just doing a lot of great things. I enjoy all of it. And that's the most important thing. I think no matter what I accomplish or what I do in the next 5 years, 20 years, the rest of my life, to me, it always has to have these two factors. I need to enjoy it, but most importantly, it needs to be something where I'm giving back. I like to help other people. I like to do where it's not just for me. It's I'm able to contribute to the world. So, well, guess we could talk back in 5 years and see where I'm at. I might be on the road. I might be in the van. You got to call me from a different state. I think I might be, who knows? I might be closer to you. Who knows?
You may have a TV show. I might be calling to say, hey, remember that time I let you on my podcast back in 2000? They hook a brother
Hey,
up.
man.
No, I love the same kind of people that I am, which is, I've been offered a bazillion different things to make money. Oh, you'd be great at this. You'd make a ton of money doing that. And you'd blah, blah. I have two rules. Number one, it has to have a purpose behind it. One that matches my moral integrity. It's not simply just an act of transactions. I just can't do anything that even remotely resembles that. And two, it's got to be something that when I look in the mirror or when someone is telling my story, that it's in line with all the other things that I've done in my life. Like there can't be that one flyer. I've done all my flyers when I was younger. I've had all the stupid decisions and the bad choices and the things that I would say I regret, but I don't, because it's all part of my journey.
Learning, yeah.
But I don't need at age 49 to have flyers anymore. Like I don't need to have that, what the hell is he thinking, look on someone's face when someone's describing something I just recently did.
Wow, I can relate deeply to that. Yeah.
It's all intentional. Like everything now, and I can sense this, and I don't know if this to be fact or not, but there's a lot of intentional decision-making going on in your life that is purposely putting you in positions to have impacts and long-lasting impacts in people's lives. You're not just waking up every day going, all right, God, let's see what the fuck happens, right? This is
what do we do today?
Right. There's a design to it, but it's a design that comes from a good place in your heart that says, okay, I want to really be that person who and I said this because it's something that resonated when my brother died. My brother had never had anyone call our house and say, can Andy come out and play? No one never was invited to a birthday party, never had a birthday party that didn't have me, my mom, my grandmother. Like he never had kids over. We never had a party for my brother's 21 years on this earth. But at his funeral, there were over 1,000 people. And I always thought to myself, who the hell are all these people and how did they know my brother? And my brother every summer went away to a camp, worked at this Christian camp, cutting grass and things of that nature. And he would leave in June and come back in August. And it wasn't far away from home, so my mom could go see him. But I didn't know that world. That was a world that I wasn't exposed to. And he had relationships with people at that camp, from the campers to the parents of the campers to the staff that changed every year. He impacted with thousands of people over 4 years that I didn't know he ever did. And these were all these people that my brother had at his funeral.
Wow. And
I remember saying to myself, who are all these people? And fast forward, a lot of years later, 31 years later, I want to make sure that the life that I live, that no one is ever asking the question, who are all these people and why are they here? Like, I want that church to be filled with whatever amount number that is of people that I've impacted, but I want it to be that everyone understands how that happened. I don't ever want it to be a surprise in someone's world on how I impacted someone else's life. I want to have that much of an intentional impact on the years that I have. I don't want that question mark to ever exist. Was he or wasn't he this person? Or did he do enough? Or did he have enough of an impact? I want that to be very well known amongst the people that know me. And I got a little depressed when I realized that my brother had this whole other life that I wasn't aware of. And I feel like I missed that person. Like I'm sure I knew that person, but I lived in this mindset that my brother needed me, and he needed me to protect him, and he needed me to take care of him. And I didn't know that there was this kid that was literally just dominating life for 3 months every summer. And no one ever judged him for stuttering. No one ever looked at him as weird because he was autistic. He just lived an amazing 3 months out of every 12 at Camp Anaba every summer. And I feel sad that I didn't get to know that guy, or that part even existed.
Wow.
And I don't ever want someone to have that guilt about not knowing a part of my life.
Yeah.
And
what's also, it's not even, to me, I agree with that. Like, you want it to be known, the things that you're doing, but it's also important about that is then it inspires other people.
Absolutely.
because it's not even about the ego for me. Look at things I've done. And I'm sure you agree. It's not even like, look what I've done, but it's like, this is how we can turn our life down. Like you said, you had a lot of hiccups. So did I. I had a lot of hiccups early in my life. And I did make that same decision you did. I'm like, I'm done screwing up. I'm done messing it up. And, life happens. We make mistakes. But for me, I noticed that when I'm able to make a positive impact, there's always people watching. And what's really interesting is kind of a good time to talk about how the Buddy Club first started is I remember there was a young adult in one of my classrooms. And resource room, for those who don't know, was basically like a room that you would get extra time to do your homework, catch up on work. And it was a small, like four to 10 people basically. And there was someone there with special needs, different disabilities than I had to overcome. And I remember one day in class, he was almost in mocking me in a way. He would sit the way I was sitting, and he was always a nice kid. So I know he didn't have any ill intent, but I was like, what are you doing? What do you, he was like doing the same positions I was doing and almost like mocking me. I looked over, I said, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, I want to be like you. And I said, be like you. And he's like, oh, I love, you're always smiling, you're always friendly to me and all this stuff. And it was this cute moment we had. And then I remember a week later, somebody from my church passed away that I was going to at the time, a young kid that we knew in the church. And he heard about that. And he wrote me a note. And at the time I was very big. I'm still into fitness and health, but then especially it was like gym twice a day. This is kind of when I was changing my life through the volunteer work. And I remember sitting there and he gave me this letter that he wrote. And on it was saying how I'm sorry for your loss of your friends. And I know you like healthy food and fruit. And he attached a little picture of a banana and he put his number on there. And he said, I would love to, if you ever need somebody to talk. And I hang on to as a reminder. And I get emotional thinking about it because those are definitely one of those events that inspired me to create the Buddy Club, because he wanted to be with me. He wanted to be like me, not because he didn't like himself, but because he saw me making that impact on the community, kind of like what you were saying. And, we are still friends, and the person watching this will know who he is when he watches this. But to this day, we're still friends, and I consider him one of the first Buddy Club members. And he, it's not a joke. I really believe when I go in the community and I introduce, I say, they're my life coach, or he's my life coach, or she's my life coach, because sometimes I walk away from these individuals, whether they're my clients or they're my friends, or whether I'm walking away from a talk, and I feel like I'm the one being motivated, because anytime I'm giving a talk or interacting with these young adults, you get some amazing insights, the stories of the things that they've overcome. And I'm telling you, there's times in talks, and I make a joke during, I go, because my talks are very interactive, and especially in the schools and the special needs centers, they're very interactive. And there's been times where I'll ask somebody, or they may call out. And as you know, as a police officer, things don't always go as planned, and things don't always go as a script. And you got to have the ability to be witty and to be in the moment. And during this one talk recently, a lot of that happened, and I was so okay with it, because what they were saying was so amazing. It was inspiring. They would share things they were overcoming. And I made a joke when one of them was sharing something. I said, listen, I can sit down and you should be coming up here. And they were hysterical. And I pretended, I acted like I was sitting down, and they couldn't handle it. And that's the truth, is I go to these talks, and whether it's interacting with these members, and I don't look at myself better than any of them. I just know my passion is leading like you and doing that. But I say to these individuals, I say, each one of you have a calling, you have a passion, and I'm just here along the way to maybe spark a little energy behind that. And like I said, it could be one thing I say that might just resonate with them. And it's those moments that make it all worth it. It really does.
Well, I love it. I think that's a perfect way to end the show. I think the little parable you just left there was something that it'll be a nice little nugget for people to walk away with. Hang tight. Don't go anywhere. We'll talk offline here, but I'll close out the show by simply saying thank you, Paul Vibes, for being a guest on the show today. You are an infectious dude. Your energy is infectious. I enjoy your mannerisms, your facial expressions match the words coming out of your mouth, and it's very natural and authentic, for the word that everyone uses in our speaking world, the authenticity word. But it's real for you, and I can't say that for everybody. But I do appreciate you being on. I hope we do this again. I hope I get a chance to come on the People's Podcast.
Make it happen.
I'm really excited for all the things that you have coming up in your future and the track you're on with impacting lives. And I wish you nothing but success.
Thank you so much.
Everybody, thank you very much for listening to this episode of the 2 Dates and a Dash podcast. I'm your host, Matt Cubbler. Once again, if you want to learn more about Paul Vibes, you go to paulvibes.com. I'll put all the links to his website and social media on the podcast notes and on all social media posts. His podcast, The People's Podcast, you can find it on YouTube currently. So please go there and subscribe. And again, if you want to learn more about me, go to mattkubbler.com. God bless everybody. Take care and go out and be kind to one another.